I'm Tony Bruschi. Welcome. We hope you've enjoyed our coverage on the trial of Alex Murdaugh. This is a look back at some of the key moments and conversations that we've had over the last several weeks regarding the case.
This is a podcast that seeks justice. Justice for the lives stolen by those in society that hide amongst us every day. Hidden in our towns, cities, and countrysides, the places that we work, and sometimes in our very own homes. This is Hidden Killers.
Welcome to this segment of Hidden Killers. I'm Tony Bruschi. You can follow me on Twitter at TonyBPod. Be sure to press subscribe wherever you download podcasts so you don't miss any of our breaking updates, conversations, and stories as we have them. Today, we're joined by Jim Rathmann, former Secret Service investigative consultant, to discuss a bit about the Alex Murdaugh case. Jim, Alex Murdaugh is such an interesting character. He appeared to have everything: kids, a loving wife, power, money, then ended up stealing to pay other people and himself and fund an alleged drug problem. Does this case remind you of anything out there that you've had experience in the past or have heard of? Someone who would go into such deep depths and allegedly kill family members to keep them quiet and to keep him, Alec himself, from being exposed?
Well, I can't think of one that comes to mind specifically, like right now. I'm sure I could research into that. But what I do find interesting, somebody has such a high profile, known so well, so well educated, obviously used a lot of that to protect him and to kind of use that as cover for what he was really doing. I think they said yesterday, or it's come out in the recent days, that they're suspecting him now in 5 other deaths, suspicious deaths, everything from life insurance policies to the housekeeper and things like that. So I think there's a lot more about this guy, but I think his current stature that he has in South Carolina is something he's been using as a cover to be able to commit his crimes. It's very interesting.
Without a doubt. Let's talk the evidence in this case. There's physical and digital that's coming out. What have you seen so far that stands out to you, that either helps, let's start with that helps or hurts Alex Murdaugh?
So something I think that will hurt Alex Murdaugh specifically is the video. There was a video that was taken at 8:44 p.m. You can hear his voice on there. There's already been people that have identified that as being his voice. Mm-hmm. Which will now go against his complete statement that he was making to law enforcement, his 911 call. I think that's very, very, very big because that puts him at the crime at the time of the murders when there was no more text messages, opened, received, sent, phone calls, and so on. So I think that is a big challenge that's going to hurt him a lot that he obviously wasn't thinking about. The other piece of evidence that I find that's going to hurt him a lot too is, he used 2 different firearms in committing these crimes, but the same ammunition, which I think was 300 blackout and 12 gauge shotgun rounds, were the same things that are found on the property as well. So I think that's going to present some big challenges for him.
Those are 2 very interesting points. The audio on that tape of the dog, where you can hear all 3 of them calling the dog, all very jovial, no sign of stress, no sign that this third person's audio is, some odd person on property that one would not want to be there. How does the defense now spin this? How do they now place Alex there? Or do they say that this was some other voice that we just don't know who it is?
Well, I think what the defense is going to do is they're going to try to call out the fact that they don't have GPS location on Alex's phone. And since they don't have that within the hour of the time frame that these murders took place, they're going to try to use that to the best of their advantage and muddy the waters to say, look, it may have sounded like him, but it's not him. You can't see him and we have no GPS. So how do we really know that's where he is? I think that's a big thing the defense is going to try to use, throw whatever they can at the wall, see what sticks. But I still don't think they're going to get away with that one. I'm pretty sure that evidence is going to stick.
When you talk about the guns on property, that's another one. And a good question I had on that is, how often do you see a murder take place where someone shows up to the residence and literally uses their weapons and finds them and let's use this and that? Don't people who commit murders typically bring their own weapons to the scene?
Typically, they bring their own weapons unless you're that intimately familiar with the residents. And so when you look at a case like this, so there was no signs of struggle. There was no defensive wounds. So whoever did this, if you look at the way the victims were, they knew who the person was. They obviously trusted who this person was because there was no struggle. So to be able to go to a residence, grab their firearms, use that ammunition is highly unlikely unless you're that familiar with the scene and where everything is kept. So I don't think that's the case at all. And I do believe there's one of those firearms is missing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I believe
they never
so.
recovered it.
There seems to be a lot made of Alex Murdaugh's opioid addiction. The amount of money he claims to have spent on the drugs is astounding for one person. Do you think there's more to this addiction than meets the eye?
There very well could be. Could be involved in something a lot crazier than that. Maybe the DEA has some information on there that we don't know about that they were following. Maybe there's some sort of I don't know if he was, selling drugs or, doing some sort of drug trafficking or being involved with some sort of bigger criminal enterprise. But I do find that to be quite alarming. And the fact that he always had such a need for large amounts of money in cash, life insurance policies, the embezzlement he did for years, the millions of dollars he stole from the law firms and so on. I think all that is going to come into play to assassinate his character. Clearly, he's got a lot of character related issues. And I do think that's all going to be evidence to point out as to why he did this.
The more that we hear about his character, the more we hear about the egregious sums of money that were needed, the more I do wonder about that road of the drugs and the opioid addiction. I don't know that we've ever seen any real proof that he had an opioid addiction from any doctor other than just him saying he had an opioid addiction. And the idea that maybe there's something else involved there. When I first heard the idea of some sort of cartel or things of that nature, I thought it was kind of ridiculous. But I mean, I'm going to ask you, is that a ridiculous thought in this case of there being something like that involved with his drug use or drug trafficking?
I think his background was used as the cover to be able to do his criminal enterprise and try to keep it away from the public's eye and from people really taking notice. So I think he did that very well by masking it. I think it's not far-fetched to think it at this point because when you're thinking of such large amounts of cash, some of the dire emergencies that he had to gain access to cash, that's what he was embezzling, the great lengths that he was going to do what he was doing. I think it's far more than just an opioid addiction. It seemed like he had plenty of money to feed his opioid addiction, but this is in far more than personal use, far more.
Yeah, that would make sense as to the urgent needs for cash on the spot, almost as if it was life or death for him, or maybe threats to his family if he did not, come through with that money. I mean, obviously it's just speculation, but is that kind of where you're thinking?
Absolutely. I don't think it's too far-fetched anymore. You asked me that question a year ago, I would have thought completely different.
Yeah.
But now looking at the circumstances and everything, I mean, there's so many twists and turns to this. I bet you there's a whole bunch we don't even know about yet.
And I wonder how much we will ever actually find out. Let me ask you this. He was a free man for many, many months after the murder of Paul and Maggie. He was not charged for that. He was charged for financial crimes initially. Was it his power in that area of the country, in South Carolina's low country, that kept him from being arrested sooner? Or what was the reasoning behind that?
I mean, that's always a possibility. It's easy for us to sit back and say we wish this could have happened earlier, but what we don't know is what was the exact evidence that they had.
Sure.
They could have convened a grand jury and not have had enough information, or the prosecutor's office thought they didn't have enough information for it to really stick. Going to court against somebody with that kind of knowledge, you have to have your facts. Otherwise, he's going to be able to poke holes in it as well. So I think they needed to get stronger evidence. Maybe there's some things that need to come back from the crime lab. There's a lot forensically that they found in regards to the gun residue, the residue on the shirt. I know there's a little bit of blood spatter. His breaking down what happened in his interview. You got the reports of fake tears and things like that. So there's a lot that was examined. Mm-hmm. How long did it take for that stuff to come back from the crime lab? How long did some of the forensics, the processing before they got enough information to say, okay, we have enough here. We have enough strong enough for a case. Let's go ahead and arrest. And I'm not surprised in the time frame that it takes, because sometimes it just takes that long for that evidence to come to light. So, I think we all wish it could happen much sooner, but sometimes you just have to wait on the facts, because once you have them, you got them.
Jim Rathmann, former Secret Service investigative consultant, thank you for your insight today on the Alex Murdaugh case. Always appreciated. If you like the podcast, be sure to press subscribe wherever you download podcasts. You can get a commercial-free experience through Apple Podcasts. You can try it for 3 days free right now. With that, you also get access to all of our programs in their entirety, and all of it ad-free as well. Please check that out and help support the program. My name is Tony Bruschi. You can follow me on Twitter at TonyBPod. Until next time, for all of us here, thanks for listening.